For me, radio goes with summer. It's a nice pairing. Cruising around, got the windows rolled down, the breeze coming in, feeling bright. You got your tan, making money, and you're just flipping through the stations. Or you have something else going on the radio, but you have something in the car. And what's the easiest thing to turn on? The radio. Growing up, we played it in the car, but also before we could drive, on the stereos, the boom boxes in houses. If you could believe it, if we didn't have any other music, because when I was young, we were transitioning to MP3 players. We had CD players, and so you'd put that on. But if you had nothing else, on Friday, we'd turn on the Friday Night Fire, whatever it was called, on the hip hop station, and we'd play that at parties, even, because I'd have a mix going. I wouldn't constantly be interrupting it, which is a big problem that I think a lot of us have with DJs on radio. And so we're trying to get away from that. Why am I even talking about radio? It's old. I know. I understand. And, putting out music online and running a website, I totally get that there are different avenues that you can go to. But still, singles, how are they dropping on the radio, right? That All My Life joint, I'm still banging it. That Lil Durk, J. Cole song dropped on the radio, and how well are they doing? Are people flipping the stations or staying on during those songs? And are they building up enough hype so they're getting written about on the blogs and then getting tours planned out because of that? Radio still holds a lot of power. You want to get plays on radio. And if you're not getting it on FM, whatever, you want radio through one of these apps, and that's what we're moving to. The DJs on the radio thought XM radio was going to be the death of, just your standard FM radio. I'm not even that familiar with it because I kind of went from radio straight to the apps like Spotify, Apple Music, SoundCloud in particular, Pandora, and all these other ones. You have Tidal and different things out there. And so, you want to put singles out and get them out on the radio and that, but it's also about the plays that you're getting through these apps. All that contributes to the plaques and the statuses, which lead to the awards and all the money and cars and everything that you want. And, so growing up, we'd be playing this stuff right as the instrumentals were starting to drop for songs. And so we'd be freestyling over the songs themselves on the radio. Just throw on a beat and try to you tweak the bass and treble just enough so that you can get just enough of the beat without the lyrics. You have to change it like every song or depending on the station. If the radio had a lot to offer, and they were also 93.1 Jams in particular was putting on these big shows, and they stopped doing that as much just because violence has increased, and Madison's had a bad history with hip hop. But I really enjoyed some of the shows that the local stations have collaborated with artists on and put together just these giant shows. 93.1 Jams, but then also 94.1 JJO, the rock station. And I don't know if there's a country one or a big classical, like all y'all get together and you go crazy and get fucked up and listen to classical music. If there's a Midwest Family Broadcasting or another one of these big conglomerates that runs one of those, I don't know about it, but there's a lot of music in Madison, and I didn't even know that pretty much the full FM radio broadcast band is taken up by different stations. I had to go through to check. I was just, cruising around as it is summer. Didn't have my music with me, so I was just flipping between the stations, and damn, it's like every single press of the Seek, it's a different station, different type of music. And so that's why I wanted to do this too. Radio really has stuck around, and it's not dead, and it's not going to die anytime soon. Just looking at how many of these stations are still around, a lot of them losing money or whatever, it exists, and you can't deny that. So I'm going to run through those in a minute. But I have the MTV shirt on. That's played a role too, transitioning from just listening to music to getting the music videos. And that was a 90s thing, but really into the 2000s, you started to see a lot more of these music videos. And that became where you listen to the song for the first time a lot. You go straight to YouTube. You may not even be hearing it on the radio for the premiere, but you hear it through the music video on YouTube. And so that's played a big part too. the music video centric, visual centric era that we've come into too has pushed radio to the side a little bit, and definitely pushed people to go online, which leads you to these other applications that are tied into YouTube. You have the apps and the social media sharing and the communities there. So it's a separate phenomenon than radio was when it first took over. It's a different time now. I worked for 93.1 Jams for a couple years. This is like right after I blew up as an artist, and so I wanted to take that and take advantage and get some professional experience. And so I applied at 93.1 Jams at Midwest Family Broadcasting, got an opportunity as an intern, and so I worked my way up from there as an unpaid intern to get a position as a part-time employee, you know, minimum wage, but it's for the experience, right? And it was great experience. Got in the studio and sat alongside JD Garfield, also worked with Big Mike and Mazer. Most of the people in that building, because I interacted with people at the different stations around, they were, for the most part, very cool and willing to chop it up. And so did that, sat in on the shows, and then also did a few late night Sunday shows, and that was cool. I wanted to turn it into a local music show, but that was a start, you know, getting some time on air. It was my idea to bring Big Sean here when he came for that wild rainstorm of a show up on the square for the Taste of Madison, one of the coolest shows I've ever been to in Madison. And so played a part in that and got to meet him, got a picture with him. It was cool. Great to meet you, Big Sean. And then later, even after I stopped working at 93.1, brought Kid Ink there for an interview. So, you know, no hard feelings. I just took that space that was being taken up by radio and filled it with journalistic writing, music journalism in particular. And so felt like it tied in a little bit closer to what I was doing. And, you know, I saw the programming and how it worked at 93.1, and you have a schedule. You're not as much choosing the songs when you're at a big place like that. You go based off, you have to play this song a certain amount of times, and then you can throw in one from this list into the mix, and then you got to do a commercial of this particular kind and two more of those, and then one of a different sort in this time frame. Working with different sound equipment and mixers, and that's really cool. Taking guests and callers and all that's fun. And I did some audio engineering too, and so great experience in radio, just wasn't exactly my thing. And I suppose there was a little bit of drama with 93.1 Jams years later when I was out in LA, and I was getting some buzz going, and this DJ out of left field on Twitter says I never worked at 93.1, I'm just a loser, you know, like all that stuff. But I did, you know, like let him know, showed a picture or something. And he was all on air talking shit like about me on 93.1 Jams, saying that I'm made up or like lying or something like that, and just lying and slandering my name live on air to tens of thousands of people, you know, just normal in my life. Wasn't exactly my thing, but I do hold that experience close and keep it in mind always when I'm moving forward and looking at these different radio type apps coming up, or what an artist is saying about touring, because payola still does play a big part in it, in how songs get played. That's why you don't just hear local songs, because big name artists and record labels pay the money to stations for the songs to get played. And that's why if an artist is indie, they're not really indie, they have a distribution deal with a major record label. They may have an indie quote unquote label or whatever, but they're still distributed by Sony or, you know, Def Jam or whatever. The pay is lower with the apps to the artists themselves, and so there's been a fight over that and trying to figure it out. And a lot of times the artists won't make a ton of money from the album sales. They'll want to go on tour, and that's based off the marketing, which is based off the radio or how much play they get on the apps. And so it's a whole cycle that you need to keep in mind as an artist. And it's really in the favor of them because they're rich, they make a lot of money, and the labels, but not so much for actually independent artists. But you're not just limited to radio anymore, so that is the good news. And there's going to be a lot more music coming our way, more AI generated. That's going to become a big battle in the future here, is trying to figure out, do these AI artists get paid? who gets paid for that music. Is it the artist? Is it the creator of the AI? I'm not going to go through every station because that's going to take too long and it's too boring. But the band does start at 88.1. First station I can hear where I'm at is 88.7 WPR, and that's classical. And then there's another classical station, and WORT at 89.9, and that's a recognizable local station that you'll see presence at local shows. And then at 90.5 you have WPR again, but this is talk instead of classical music. 91.3 is WPR again, and it's the same as that last station I just said. They come up a few times, and then again later on, WPR broadcasts the same thing on 107.9. So they have the strongest presence as far as the exact same thing on different frequencies. So I thought that was worthy of note. WSEM is 91.7, and that's the UW student radio. But then you get to the 92s and 93s, and that's like rock and I guess rock and hip hop for the most part, some oldies in there. And then it transitions into the 95s and 96s and 97s, more classical. It gets more classical, oldies and Christian. 97, you're really getting into Christian. And I didn't realize how many religious stations we had until doing this. That's another thing I noticed. It's the WPR presence and also the Christian radio stations, because you have a few here. All right, some oldies mixed in there. There's a lot of oldies, of course. Our stations are geared towards boomers, clearly. It's a lot of 70s and 80s music, and then if they're adult contemporary, that means like 80s and newer. So that's not even my generation yet. You know, that'd be like 90s and newer. So it's not really geared towards millennials and younger at all. But that's okay. That's fine. It's just not. The adult contemporary stuff, okay, there's more of that, more country, and then you get some sports talk shows in there. The Madison ESPN station is 100.5. Yeah, more Christian, some pop, and rock and roll, I guess. You know, that's what, you can't say that the radio stations represent the local interests in music. But it does say what those in positions of power would like us to hear musically. And I suppose that differs depending on where you're at. There's some variety shows in there, community-owned shows, even a couple, or one at least, Spanish station. There's Spanish shows on some of these other channels, but yeah, La Movida is 94.5, so if you're curious. Radio's not your only option anymore, and for me personally, I find it boring and annoying a lot, but it is cool. It's brought me a lot of good memories, and there's something special about it being built into your vehicles. You can just hit power and flip between stations. So yeah, it's hard to avoid. It's going to be around for a while and still has some value.